Oh, and I was muted. Welcome, everyone, and welcome to our first town hall of 2023. We're going to get started here in just a few minutes. We have a jam-packed show with amazing special guests, Leader Senator Schumer and Senator Elizabeth Warren, along with experts, student loan borrowers. We're really here to share this all with you today. So we're just going to give it a moment for folks to sign on, and we will get started. And just so folks know, you can chat us, but the chat has been disabled for this conversation. But we will be sharing links with you all on how you can get involved with the People's Rally. That's what we're here today for. Today is to launch the virtual, this is the virtual part of the in-person rally. We will all be going to the Supreme Court on February 28th to show our support for student loan borrowers. I know I'll be there. You can see Cody on the other camera. Cody will be there. Our whole team will be there, along with hundreds of student loan borrowers here to support student debt cancellation, along with so many wonderful partners, some of whom you'll see today from NAACP, Young Invincible, Student Borrower Protection Center, and countless more. There's truly dozens and dozens of organizations, labor unions that have come together because this is the moment. I don't think you get higher than the Supreme Court. I said this last year when we finally got the president to do an executive action, and now we're rolling into the Supreme Court. But this is really, really important. We thank you for taking time an early morning. You know, I'm here on the West Coast. It's 8 a.m. I know for so many of you it's early afternoon, but we are very honored to have you join us. I saw a sound check. I think that's been dealt with. But Cody, we're very excited about the Supreme Court rally. I don't know if you had any housekeeping notes to add.
Yeah, well, I just want to first remind everyone that we have a pretty star-studded cast. Really excited to hear from our Senate leaders, from advocates from across the country, borrowers themselves, all the people who are part of this movement to cancel student debt. And so I'm really honored to be part of this event and be here with you today. As far as housekeeping, we've got a pretty, solid schedule for today with several discussions related to the legal authority to cancel student debt, what advocates are doing, and of course, this big event at the end of this month, the People's Rally at the Supreme Court. So we'll walk through today's agenda pretty quickly. So, stay tuned, but I know there's gonna be a lot of information. So we are live streaming this event, and everyone who's registered and joined us today and registered and maybe couldn't make it with us today are gonna get a link later today, and they can watch the event all over again. So I'm really excited because I know there's gonna be thousands of people out there who wanna hear from these leaders, hear from advocates, hear from borrowers, and may not be able to join us this morning. But for those of you who are here, thank you. I know it's early in the morning for many of us. This is a really exciting opportunity.
Thank you, Cody. And now we're going to be able to hear from one of our first very special guests. As we said at the top, Student Debt Crisis Center is proud to be one of the co-organizers of the People's Rally for Student Debt Cancellation. This is going to be held this month, February 28th. On the steps of the Supreme Court from 8 a.m. to 12 p.m. or to 12 p.m. That's correct. We're bringing together our partners, NAACP, Young Invincible, Student Borrower Protection Center, as well as Senators Schumer and Warren. And I'm, as always, so honored to introduce Senator and Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, who is the senator from New York and has been a fierce advocate for student loan borrowers. This man has not stopped for years fighting for student loan debt cancellation to help boost our economy, help close the racial wealth gap for borrowers, and to put an end to predatory loan practices that have harmed and trapped borrowers for decades. Leader Schumer led the push to call on the president to take executive action to broadly cancel student debt, and now he's continuing with us in the fight to ensure the president's plan is fully executed and enacted. I know personally that Leader Schumer is so deeply committed to this issue, and as always, it's an honor to introduce you, Senator.
Well, thank you, Natalia, and thank you. Let me return the compliment for the amazing work you have done. I don't know a single person who lives, breathes student debt 24/7 more than you do, and we're just blessed to have you as leader as leader on this issue, and blessed that you are so talented, unrelentless. You know, my dad passed away a year ago, November, and many of you may have experienced the same thing who were close to your parents and now they're gone. He's still here with me. And he taught me some lessons. One lesson he taught me that stays with me day in, day out. He said to me, if you're undertaking something important, look in your heart, make sure it's the right thing to do. But then if you're sure, persist and persist and persist. And as he put it, God will reward you and you will succeed. Well, we're going to persist until we succeed, because this is certainly the right thing to do. And my dad, as well as you, Natalia, and more importantly, the millions of people who need relief from student debt, importune me on. So I want to thank also not only you and the Student Debt Crisis Center. I want to thank the Student Borrower Protection Center, the NAACP, and the Young Invincibles for putting this together. And you know, when we spoke last September, it was exultant. President Biden had just announced student debt relief for millions of Americans across the country. And to put it in the Brooklynese, which I always speak in, it was a big effing deal, a huge deal. I hope you'll excuse my language, but this issue is so near and dear to my heart. I've long believed that higher education is the ladder up for millions of Americans, and particularly millions of Black, Latino, and Asian Americans, particularly those whose families never went to college before. But it's important for everybody. And student debt has become the anchor weighing down Americans so badly. I've always believed deeply in my bones, if we could just provide these borrowers some relief, we could open the doors to opportunity to so many people. Help those who come from middle-class families to stay there, help those struggling to get to the middle class to get there. Now, it would be a lot easier for young Americans. It would make it a lot easier for Americans to buy a car, make a down payment, start a family, save for retirement, if we could. That's what I believed, if we could vanquish student debt. So that's what we're trying to do here. Many of you on this Zoom have signed on to petitions, attended town halls, workshops, rallies, all with the intent of getting the crushing weight of student debt off your back. That's our goal, to relieve that burden and make the American dream more accessible. But just as they seemingly always do when we try to help everybody, everyday Americans, Republicans, MAGA Republicans, right-wing, are getting in the way. Some of these MAGA and right-wing Republicans talk a big game about helping working people. But right now they are in court fighting President Biden's student debt relief plan. These court cases are funded in large part by very, very wealthy people who say, I don't want to pay any taxes. I don't want the government to spend any money, even though they easily, if they had 100 children, could afford to put all of them through college. It's just gross. Well, when you listen to Republicans' arguments, they're horribly out of debt, out of touch with average Americans. MAGA Republicans claim, for one, that they're the party of fiscal responsibility, but they didn't bat an eye when they gave tax breaks to millionaires and large corporations. So give me, as they say in Brooklyn, an effing break. MAGA Republicans refuse to give working people trying to get an education a ladder up to a better life. They're just concerned with their own greed and selfishness. They have no issue doubling down on Trump tax cuts by proposing a national sales tax that would get rid of taxes on them and would make things easier, for the ultra-rich and hurt the average person. They also argue, these MAGA Republicans, that student debt relief is somehow a giveaway to the wealthy and undeserving borrowers. That's utter bull. Let's set the record straight. 90% of the relief dollars go to those who earn less than $75,000 a year, and no individual or household in the top 5% of incomes receives a penny in relief. So that's utter bull, but that's the argument they use. It's so ironic. These very wealthy people who don't want to pay taxes are saying the money goes to wealthy people. Here's the truth. Republicans oppose student debt, these MAGA Republicans and many of them, because they want to protect the uber wealthy and the top 1% of the earners at the expense of everyone else in the country. Their opposition's harming millions of people. Before MAGA, these Republicans stopped to sue President Biden's debt cancellation, more than 100,000 people were applying for relief every single day. That's how broad and widespread it was. 16 million fully approved for relief. But it's now 82 days since the program was blocked by the courts. They go to their own courts and get their own decisions, and millions of borrowers have been denied from this immediate relief. As of last week, 26 million borrowers applied to the program, 1.5 million in my home state of New York. That's how many people we could be helping. But our fight is not over. Later this month, the Supreme Court will hear oral arguments on Biden's student debt relief program. I know you'll all be there. We're all going to be there making our voices heard. I will be there with you. We need to be loud. We need to be clear. Resolving student debt would make achieving the American dream a little easier for so many people. I want to close by thanking each and every one of you on this call again. You fought, you organized, you made your stories heard, and as a result, American people are on your side. But I have one more request. As my father would remind us, persist, persist, persist. Keep up the work, keep up the faith, keep up the pressure. We've made great progress. We got more work to do. We're going to keep fighting because the law is on our side. We have to show the American people who's on their side and who isn't. It's not the Republicans, the MAGA Republicans, who claim to protect working people and then do everything they can to block this life-changing relief. With that, let me pass this on to a great champion, a great friend, one of the originators of the whole movement of student debt relief, and someone who's always on the side of the working families of America, my friend and colleague, Senator Warren.
Well, thank you very much, Leader Schumer. I appreciate the introduction. It's very generous. You know, you have been such a terrific partner in this fight, and we just wouldn't be here without you. That's also true, I have to say. Our colleagues, Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley, Congressman Jim Clyburn, Senator Raphael Warnock, we have really put a team together in Congress that has worked hard on this. I am so glad to be here today with all of you as we gear up to defend President Biden's historic decision to cancel student debt for up to 43 million Americans. And now we're going to be out there in front of the Supreme Court to do this. I want to start, though, by saying how grateful I am to all of you for the hard work you've put into fighting for this relief. Without you, we could not have gotten this far. We have gotten to this point because people like you and the coalitions that you have built have really pushed and pushed and pushed and made this a national issue. You've shared your personal stories. You've highlighted the realities of middle-class families all across this country who are being crushed by student loan debt. Now, evidently, Republican operatives and their allies in the courts haven't met any of the hardworking Americans out there who are busting their tails, who are working multiple jobs, and who have watched their debt loads keep right on climbing. President Biden's plan to cancel up to $20,000 in student loan debt is life-changing relief for millions of working families that have been trapped in a broken student loan system and who are still trying to recover from the COVID-19 pandemic. We know who has student loan debt. It is not wealthy people who went to Ivy League schools. It's middle and working class Americans who were born into families who couldn't afford to write a check to go to school. So think about this. Most of the student loan borrowers, 99.7% of them, did not go to an Ivy League school. But look at it the other way on who has to borrow money. Half of the students at state schools and nearly 90% of students at HBCUs borrow money in order to advance their education after high school. And it's not just people who have four-year degrees or even those with two-year degrees and certificates who have student loans. It's people who don't have any diploma at all. These are people who did everything right. They did everything our country asked them to do. They graduated from high school and they tried to advance their education. But for a lot of them, life got in the way. They got sick or they had to take care of a family member who was sick, and they had to leave before finishing their degree. It's Black Americans who borrow more money to go to college, borrow more money while they're in college, and have a harder time paying it off after college. It should be no surprise that 90% of the relief dollars from President Biden's cancellation will go to Americans earning less than $75,000 a year. And here's the thing, when we talk about life changing, at least 1 in 4 Black borrowers will see their debt completely eliminated. So will about half of all Latino borrowers. And millions of people, millions and millions, who couldn't save for retirement, who couldn't buy their first home, who couldn't start a small business, who couldn't start their families because of student loan debt, will have a brighter future thanks to President Biden. The President of the United States has reached out literally to tens of millions of working families and said, I'm putting government on your side. But the MAGA Republicans are in this game for the rich and the powerful. They are all for giving handouts to giant corporations and billionaires. But the minute our country creates just a little breathing room for the millions of hardworking people whose biggest sin was that they grew up in a family that just couldn't afford to pay for an education, but they still tried to get one, then those Republicans are out there trying to undo it. Republicans launched these baseless lawsuits to deny working families relief they need. 16 million Americans have already been fully approved for this relief. Think about that, 16 million already there. Their loan servicers have been notified and they are ready to write down those balances. That's 380,000 million people in Massachusetts. It's more than 640,000 people in Georgia. It's more than 1 million people in Florida, already ready to have their student loan debt canceled. I want to be clear on this. President Biden has the legal authority to cancel student debt for these families. The experts agree on this. More than a dozen amicus briefs were filed in the Supreme Court in support of the president's cancellation plan. Even conservative legal scholars filed a brief stating that the legal theories behind these lawsuits challenging student loan debt are, quote, wrong, and many of them have dangerous implications. Republican officials and their extremist allies are playing politics with the livelihoods of millions of families, and they need to get out of the way. I have no doubt that if the Supreme Court of the United States applies the law, then student loan debt will be canceled. What I'm afraid of is a Supreme Court that applies politics. That's what we need to guard against. Look, we have come a long way, and I am truly grateful for your hard work in getting us to this point. But I ask you to keep on going. We are so close, and we cannot back down now. We are fighting back against ridiculous lawsuits. We are fighting to ensure that every person eligible for cancellation gets this transformative relief. We are fighting to fix a broken student loan system and to ensure that no family gets crushed by student loan debt ever again. And that's why it's important that we got to get the word out here. We got to show up at the People's Rally for Student Debt Cancellation on February 28th. You know, for me, bottom line, it's about democracy. I believe in us. I believe in what we can do together. And I want to say one more time, thank you for all that you do. It is an honor to fight alongside you. And I'll see you on the steps of the Supreme Court, February 28th. Be there. Cody, I'll turn this back over to you.
Well, thank you so much, Senator. I was thinking as you were speaking, like, wow, I have been working on this issue for almost a decade, and you have been fighting alongside with me and our allies for so long. And then today, We have folks who are just now joining this movement. So you've really been committed. And so we're so grateful, but you're absolutely right. We see the finish line in front of us. We have to keep going. So I will be there on the steps of the Supreme Court alongside you and so many others who are listening. Thank you, Senator.
You bet. See you there.
Great. Well, you've heard a few of us say today that student debt cancellation is legal. And Senator Warren mentioned it. The legal experts and legal minds agree. So we have brought on one of those legal minds and experts, one that I really trust, and that's Mike Pierce. Mike, are you here with us today?
Hi, Cody.
There he is. Mike is the executive director and co-founder of one of our strongest allies, the Student Borrower Protection Center. And he's an attorney, an advocate, and a former regulator who worked in the federal government on student loan policy. So truly an expert. He has, a decade of experience. Mike, we're really honored to have you here today. Thanks for joining.
Thanks for having me.
Of course. So I think the first question for so many of us listening is, what is going on with these Supreme Court cases? I'm not a legal expert. We've got 400 plus people on today, and many of them aren't constitutional law attorneys. So can you just give us a quick summary of what these cases look like and what exactly the Supreme Court is going to have to mull over on February 28th?
Sure. So I'm going to answer that question two different ways. I think first, the most important thing to know, and I think that Senator Warren and Senator Schumer both made this point a couple different ways, this is just politics. There are many major issues of law that get brought up before the Supreme Court because there is some uncertainty. And the Constitution says that this is the process for figuring out that uncertainty. The principle of judicial review has been part of the way that America works since shortly after the founding. And that's normal and healthy in the way that democracy works. This is something else. This is Joe Biden's political opponents backed by dark money pushing a case that doesn't have merit all the way up to the highest court in an effort to give the president a black eye. And again, that's not a legal opinion. I mean, it is also a legal opinion, but it's just a kind of a scan of the facts and what's happening before us. This is an extraordinary, nearly unprecedented outcome from lawsuits that were filed just a few months ago. We've skipped through every step of the normal judicial process. There's been no finding of facts by a trial court. There's really been no reasoned opinion at any piece of the process here. Instead, there's been this enormously rapid and hasty rush to get this policy in front of the conservative Supreme Court with the hope that 5 justices can be persuaded to score a political hit on the president. And that's all it is.
You mentioned the opponents on the other side of this, and maybe we can take just a quick second to really kind of frame who our opponents are here, because there's a reason we're organizing a huge rally at the Supreme Court, because they're on the other side of this, some strong opponents with a lot of resources and money with an agenda. So maybe you can just give us a quick sense of, who it is that we're rallying against and who it is that we need to persuade to make sure that Supreme Court supports student debt cancellation.
Yeah, so I think there are, so there's 2 cases that are before the Supreme Court. One is this case brought by 2 people that have student loans that are grumpy that they didn't get more debt relief or that they were left out. And, I think we're all grumpy that this policy left some folks out. It's really, we fought alongside student debt crisis and Senator Warren and Senator Schumer and many others for broad universal debt relief. We didn't get that from the administration. But the difference, I think, between the advocates that have been fighting for debt relief for tens of millions of people for a decade and this dark money funded challenge is that these borrowers aren't seeking more debt relief. They're trying to stop debt relief for everybody. And that's one of the ways you can tell this whole thing is a scheme. They are backed by money from Republican special interests, including Bernie Marcus, the founder of Home Depot, and the Mercer family. So these are big Republican special interests that fund the conservative movement. And on the other side, the other case, you have 6 Republican state officials representing their states that have sued to block this, making some absolutely wild arguments that their states are somehow better off for not driving tens of billions of dollars worth of relief into their local communities. They're stealing money from their constituents to prove a political point. But I do think it's also helpful to understand who's not aligned on the other side of us. You don't have the US Chamber of Commerce. You don't have the biggest corporations in America. You don't have many of the forces that drive the Supreme Court to make terrible law that hurts working families. We're not asking Justice Roberts or Justice Kavanaugh to pick a side in a fight between business and working families the way that they often do and often come down the wrong way. That's one of the things that gives me hope. This is purely political in a way that many of the cases that come up to the Supreme Court are not.
Well, with that hope in mind, because I think that's really important here, we have a win in sight. We have to be optimistic. I saw some folks who put in the chat here, and I think we can just address it. What makes this moment different? Of all the years we've been advocating for relief for student loan borrowers, this year feels very pivotal. So do you have any thoughts about why this moment is so important, why the stakes are high, and why this is different than any other times that we've been fighting?
We haven't won yet, but we have come further and faster than at any point since you and I have been in this fight, Cody, and it's been a long time. We are at a place now where the president of the United States has put his name and his prestige and his power on the line on the side of people with student debt. That didn't happen under President Trump. That didn't happen under President Obama. Joe Biden made common cause with people that have student debt. And there's an enormous amount of power in that.
I 100% agree. I have been working on this issue with you, Mike, and so many others for a long, long time. It has been nearly a decade, and many of the other people on this call have been dedicated for this long. If you're hearing from us and we're this optimistic after fighting for this long, you know it's the real deal. We really have a chance. Mike, before we let you go, the whole purpose we have everyone here today is not just to talk about the details, so thank you for giving us that information, but we also want to mobilize people to be able to create change and make a difference at the People's Rally. So can you just give us a reminder what's going on February 28th, and what is your team doing to be a part of this, to mobilize folks, and will you be there with us fighting?
We will be there with you fighting. So we are putting together a fantastic event on the steps of the Supreme Court with speakers, including borrowers telling their stories about how they've been affected by the student debt crisis, and leaders from across the movement to cancel student debt, including our champions in Congress, elected officials from across the country. This is going to be positive. It's going to be high energy. It's going to be an opportunity for us to help show the public and the press that the fight for student debt isn't over, and that we expect the Supreme Court to deliver for people. But I think it's also important, we're going to use this day as a reminder that this isn't just about student debt. Of course, we all depend on the Supreme Court to come out the right way here, but this is also a test for democracy. It's about whether the president can use executive power to make people's lives better, or whether a conservative court is going to once again snatch people's rights away. And so I do think part of the goal here with this rally isn't just to show that people with student debt have political power and we're demanding better from our government, but that we need democracy to work for people, and that the broader progressive movement is behind this effort.
I 100% agree. So that is February 28th, 8 a.m. at the Supreme Court. I've dropped a link in the chat. Please RSVP. And this is for folks that are in Washington, in the near area. And we're also organizing buses in New York City, Philadelphia, and other areas where we know that folks care about this issue, are within driving distance, and want to be there to share their support. So click on that link, RSVP. You can join all of us and all the special guest speakers as well. Mike, thanks again for joining us. It's really been a pleasure, and I appreciate the expert legal opinion because I'm just a pretend attorney.
Thanks so much.
Okay, with that, I have the great honor of passing it on to who I think is one of the great and really exciting young advocates working on this issue. You've already heard me and Mike say it. We're old timers. We've been working on this issue for so many years. But I'm joined now by Sabrina Calzon. Sabrina is the managing director at the Student Debt Crisis Center. She advocates for student debt cancellation by putting borrowers and their stories front and center. That is absolutely key. Real everyday voices. And as a student loan borrower and a first-generation American, she is passionate about bringing awareness to the disproportionate impact of student loan debt on communities of color. Sabrina, I've seen you in Washington, D.C. We're going to get to see a clip of you actually at the court later today. Thank you so much for being here and for being, the next generation of folks fighting for this issue.
Well, thank you for having me. As you know, Cody, the student debt space is a very big space, and there's enough room for folks who are older, younger, and all in between. And so it's just really exciting to be fighting alongside everyone in this current moment. But I think what is most important is, you know, focusing on borrowers and putting them front and center. So today I'm joined by Sahara Artiga, who is a student loan borrower born and raised in Washington, D.C. Hey, Sahara, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Well, as I said, you know, our goal is to always put borrowers front and center. So I would, you know, like to hear a little bit from you about what the impact has been on your life in terms of student debt. What has that impact look like for you?
It has impacted my entire family. I grew up in a one-bedroom apartment with my two siblings. And right before college, my parents told me I would have to save a certain amount of money to be able to even go to school. Otherwise, I'd have to defer for a year, work more, and then be able to go. I didn't want to defer. So leading up to college, I had 3 jobs. And even with that, I still had to take out student loans, and my parents still had to take out the Parent Plus loans. To this day, I think that's one of the main reasons why my younger brother never went to college, because he was at home while I was away at school, and my parents were struggling trying to even pay with the Parent Plus loan to help me go to school. So it hasn't only impacted my parents, myself, my brother, but it's also going to impact my younger sister, who's about to start her first year in high school in 2023. My mom has paid off, luckily, all of her student debt by just working hard and saving the money. But unfortunately, she still owes for the Parent Plus loan that she's been paying since 2014 from when I graduated school. And so I can't imagine what that's going to look like for my parents if they have to take out another Parent Plus loan for my sister and continue paying on that one. And then it's also going to affect my daughter, because I have she's almost 2, she'll be 2 in February. And if I'm still paying on my loans from 2014 when I graduated, I don't know how I'll save for her future, or even to make sure she doesn't have debt when she goes to school.
Right. And, you know, one of the things I've been seeing most in the comments is, you know, folks talking about how they have Parent Plus loans and how much that impacts them as well. I know that that is something that is similar in my family. I have student loans, my sister has student loans, but my dad also had to take out Parent Plus loans in order to support us and make sure that we were able to go to school. And so I think it's a reality that we really need to talk about how this is a multi-generational issue. Millions of folks are being affected of all ages. I think oftentimes we hear this is a young person issue, but there are older folks out there too who are looking to retire. And so this is really important that we're talking about this. And I know you touched a little bit about your daughter and thinking about her future. And so I'd love to, you know, hear about what would student debt cancellation mean for you, for your daughter, and for your family's future.
For us, I think it would allow us to finally save for her future. Something I would like to do as early as I can, because I know things will be more expensive. I'd probably be able to actually buy a house. No one in my family has ever owned a house, so that would be a big thing. My parents would actually be able to start saving for their retirement. And it's kind of sad because they're coming up on retirement age, like they should have been able to save by now. But with all the things I've had to pay for, even just with student debt, they haven't been able to. So I think it would mean a lot. It would be really helpful, and at least make a brighter future for me and my siblings. Like my sister would be able to go to college without maybe the burden that my brother felt would put on my parents.
Yeah, I'm definitely, our family is thinking about that too. I have a younger brother who's in high school currently and thinking about going to college as well, and thinking about how are we going to be able to afford that. And so one of the things that we're also talking a lot about in this space is how do we talk about student debt cancellation, but also advocate for debt-free college, so that that is something that doesn't become a crisis, you know, years to come for the future generations. And so I think that's really important. But I'm really grateful that, you know, we had you on here and that you're sharing your story and speaking up. I think our movement is so powerful because there's so many folks out there who are willing to speak up and share. And so I would love for you to, you know, tell us why you chose to share your story and why you encourage others to share their stories as well. And I think Cody will drop a link in the chat if folks are interested in sharing their stories as well.
I chose to share my story because I know everyone has a different story. So I think it's important for people that maybe didn't grow up in the circumstances that I grew up in, or maybe didn't know that a high school student could have 3 jobs just because they wanted to go to college. that they maybe can hear my story and have empathy and understand how much the student debt cancellation would help my parents, my kid, my siblings, and other families that maybe have similar stories or other versions of what I went through.
Yeah. And, I just, again, really appreciate you taking the time to come on here to share your story, to speak with us. And for hundreds of folks that are out there listening who also have a story, I just saw someone comment, you are not your loan, you are not your student debt. And you did everything right? Like you worked hard, you tried to avoid this, but unfortunately the cost of college is just way too high. And so that's something that we need to continue advocating for debt-free college, for folks to have their student debt canceled, and for people to live and be able to pursue the American dream. So again, thank you so much, Sahara. Really appreciate you joining us today. And I think we have a little video to show you all of us, connecting with student loan borrowers, and then we're going to jump right into another panel. So thank you again, and stay with us, folks.
Thank you.
The Supreme Court, and I'm talking to some folks about how they're personally impacted by student debt. I'm a student loan borrower myself. I have about $30,000 of student debt, and I believe in student debt cancellation because it would free not only my future, but my family's future, and so many people who are out there.
Hi, my name is Fatima Rasul. I'm a first generation student studying at Howard University, and student debt has affected me because it affects my mental health, struggling to figure out how I'm going to be able to afford such a high cost of tuition.
So debt cancellation will put a small dent in my graduate student loans. As I shared, I acquired a lot when I decided to pursue my graduate education, but I think I'm most excited about what it means for my family. So student debt cancellation will remove, if not all, a great chunk of debt from my siblings. And so that means that they can focus on home ownership. They can focus on marriage. They can focus on building a family if they want to. We also don't come from generational wealth.
So as a current college student, how does the debt cancellation decision affect you?
So currently, I already pay $193 monthly on my student loans. Once I graduate, student debt will prevent me from relocating for a career, will restrict my chances of attending law school as I already have accumulated $200,000 of student debt, and will prevent me from one day supporting my family.
And so we need to come out in force and talk about how student debt cancellation is legal. So we invite you to join us on February 28th for the People's Rally for Student Debt Cancellation. We're going to be here with hundreds of folks calling on the Supreme Court to do the right thing.
Meet me at the steps of the Supreme Court to tell SCOTUS that we need President Biden's debt cancellation now.
Great. So I think it was very clear to see that whether it's raining or it's sunny and whatever the weather, we're all really excited to be at the Supreme Court on February 28th. And we really hope that you'll join us. I'm going to kick it off to Natalia to moderate this panel, but I'm just really excited to be here with Wisdom and Satra and have these conversations.
Yes, and thank you, Sabrina, for traveling to DC yesterday, giving a little preview of what February 28th is going to be like. You, Satra, were there in front of the steps, and that was just so great. And yes, rain or shine, we will be there making our voices heard along with hundreds of people. And it's my honor to introduce Satra Taylor and Wisdom Cole. Satra is the Director of Higher Education Policy and Workforce at Young Invincibles, leading the overall strategy and positioning on higher education and workforce issues. Satra is an experienced equity advocate, leveraging policy partnerships and research as levers for social change in higher education. She is skilled at engaging coalitions, managing collective investments, public speaking, writing for diverse audiences, and equity-focused policy analysis. Such an honor to have you here today, Satra. And then we also have Wisdom Cole. and Wisdom is the director of the NAACP Youth and College Division. We've worked with Wisdom for years. And in this role, he serves more than 700 youth councils, high school chapters, and college chapters actively involved in the fight for civil rights. Wisdom brings extensive experience in civil rights advocacy training, training institute, electoral action training, grassroots organizing, webinars, both at the local, state, and national level. And he has managed the national campaign efforts focused on building Black political power through organizing youth leadership, development, advocacy, and direct action organizing for the past 3 years. Again, such an honor to have you here, Wisdom. And you all know Sabrina Calazan's our managing director, who was out in front of the steps of the Supreme Court in the rain yesterday. Again, thank you for that. So I'd love to just jump right into this. And I'll direct this question to you first, Wisdom. What is the People's Rally and what is happening on February 28th?
Thank you so much, Natalia. And also just thank you to Student Debt Crisis Center for having me here today. The People's Rally for Student Debt Cancellation is exactly just that, the People's Rally for Student Debt Cancellation. We have been working on this issue of student debt cancellation not just for the last 2 years, but for generations. And so this is a monumental moment for us to continue to fight for what we deserve, right? As Senator Warren and Senator Schumer, discussed earlier, this is a critical point in time within this campaign. And we need each and every single one of you to join us in support as we rally to ensure that we see student debt cancellation happen in this moment in time. For years, we've gone back and forth, and just to even discuss a little bit of the history, when folks started saying student debt cancellation up on the Hill, people thought that this would never happen. They would look at them, excuse my language, like they were crazy. And so now that we have consistently had a drumbeat around student debt cancellation, sharing the research, sharing the data, sharing the stories, right? The impactful ways in which student debt burdens all of us. And this not just being an issue that impacts young people, but being an intergenerational issue, right? I'm happy and proud to support and to be the national director at the NAACP as we actually come up upon our 114th birthday. And we have members all across our association in every age group and demographic that are impacted by student loans in some way, fashion, or form. And so this People's Rally is really going to be a culmination of a plethora of organizations. I like to call them the Student Debt Avengers, pulling together to really have as I like to say, a party with a purpose, right? We are going to be on the steps of the Supreme Court with our key leaders, with borrowers, with young people coming from across the nation who are going to be working to support to make sure that we see this come across the finish line. And so I'm excited to see each and every single one of you there on February 28th at 8 a.m.
Well, we are excited to join you, Wisdom, and to join the hundreds of people that we know that you all are rallying at the NAACP to join us. And another person helping to plan the rally is Satra. Satra, as someone who is helping to plan the rally, what are you most excited about?
Hello, everyone. First, I want to say thank you so much as DCCE for organizing and ensuring that I had an opportunity as YI Director of Higher Education and Workforce Policy. Super excited to be here and just having this conversation. I think I'm most excited, and I want to take Wisdom's term in terms of the Student Debt Avengers in the unity. There are so many different organizations. Today, you're seeing just a handful of organizations that are crafting and organizing the student debt rally, but the conversations, the planning, the intentionality really does warm my spirit. And it also just is affirmation that this is the people's rally. We all come from different lived experiences, different backgrounds, but we all have one common goal or one common mission. And I just appreciate how we're just coming together using our resources, using our knowledge and our expertise to ensure that this rally is successful and that people impacted by student loan debt are at the forefront and are able to share their experiences with the Supreme Court justices and the federal government in general.
I love it. Avengers unite, right? Like we all just need to get together. We are the Student Debt Avengers. Love that, Wisdom and Satra. And Sabrina, how can folks join, if they want to go to the rally? I think you mentioned this before.
Yeah, so, we have a sign up link, which I believe Cody has dropped in the chat quite a few times, but he'll drop it again if folks are interested in, signing up and attending. But I also want to, flag that there are opportunities if you cannot attend too, for you to join into a live stream. There are video opportunities. We know that it's going to be live streamed from within the Supreme Court as well, the arguments. And so there are ways for folks to plug in. It's called the People's Rally. And so we want the people to be attended. We want the people to be involved. And so who are these people? These are first-gen students. These are first-gen Americans. These are older folks, younger folks. These are veterans, single parents, and the people who are being impacted every single day. And so without you, there's the people. We are the people. We need to show up. We need to make our voices heard, and we need to get involved. And so it's been just a joy getting to work alongside Satra and Wisdom and everyone as we try and plan this rally. And we're really excited to see the turnout on the 28th.
Yeah, we already have thousands of people signed up. So, thank you for those who have already signed up. And Sabrina's right, they will be broadcasting the oral arguments directly from the court. So that's an opportunity. We encourage you all to listen in to our government defend student debt cancellation. As Wisdom said, this seemed, out of crazy or just absolutely not possible just a few years ago. And now we're in a situation where our government is actively defending student debt cancellation. So I encourage you all to tune into that. And then we will be live streaming the rally so you can watch us all in DC and share. And then another way, right, Sabrina, is folks can share their stories through the impact statement.
Yes, we have a link that we can also drop where folks can share their stories. And I know that thousands of people have already shared their stories. I was able to connect with some folks in DC yesterday who shared a little bit with me about their experiences. But I think when we all come together and share our stories, there's power in numbers. And so the more stories we collect and we can put out there, the greater difference we can make. And so, I used to be, hesitant to share my story, but now I'll tell it to anyone who can hear. And I think I just have these conversations with Uber drivers and random people that I encounter. But I think it's important because we have more that unites us and divides us. And I think it's important to continue having these conversations. And so, I'm a student loan borrower, first generation daughter of immigrants, and I was the first one in my family to go to school. Didn't really know how to navigate FAFSA or anything like that. I went to the school that offered me the most financial aid, but still had to take out student loans. I have a sister who went to school who's graduating this year. I have a younger brother who's looking to go to college in about 2 years. And so this impacts my family in that sense. It impacts my decision of being able to afford, my own place, being able to buy a home, to start a family, being able to relocate, just thinking about things like that. I think about my parents who, again, are thinking about retirement. And along those lines. And when I think about my story, I think about my community at large as well, and just all the other people whose voices are not, included in my own. There's just so many stories out there that we're not, we don't know all of them. And so when we share, we're then bringing awareness to the people that we might have been missing out and leaving out. And so we want to be as inclusive as we can be. And so I think that's even more, reason for folks to share their stories, so that we can reach out to these different communities, because if there's one, there's probably more than one. And so we want to make sure that everyone is looped into this work that we're doing.
Thank you, Sabrina. And Sahara agreed with you. The reason she shared her story is everyone has their own unique story, and it helps us and lawmakers and policymakers so much to read those and really understand the depth of what's going on. You're not the only student loan borrower on this panel. So Satra, if you're comfortable, and as Isabel's saying in the chat, no one should have shame about their debt. So would you share your student debt story with us too?
Absolutely and gladly, if that means that student debt cancellation will happen. So I want to also highlight an underlying theme that we've seen with panelists in sharing stories is that we're also changing the narrative. I think it's important to change the narrative because it's not that students are being senseless in terms of their student loan and of their pursuit to higher education. Folks who may come from similar backgrounds as myself, such as a low income background, or I don't come from wealth, as I shared in the video. I pursued education to further my family's, for my family to our upward social mobility. So I just want to be very clear as we're continue to have these conversations that we're shifting the narrative, because it's not individualistic in a lot of these aspects. We're trying to build the generational wealth. And so for me, I actually acquired the majority of my student debt pursuing graduate education. I went to a regional institution similar to Sabrina in order to cut down the cost of my college. And because I also had aspirations of continuing my education, I wanted to pursue my master's, and I'm a current doc student as well. But also in terms of aspirations, my grandfather had a 3rd grade education, and my grandmother wanted to pursue higher ed, but due to the riots during her generation, she did not pursue education because of that fear. So again, in terms of changing that narrative, I'm doing this for generations before and after me. Unfortunately, as well, when we're talking about student debt, we have to talk about what are the demographic of people who are acquiring all of this student debt. And research shows that women hold 2/3 of all student debt. The research also shows that borrowers with federal student loan debt are disproportionately people of color. And then lastly, Black women have more debt than any other group. I find myself in all of those buckets. And so I have to think strategically about every decision I make when it comes to my career and just personal adventures. I decided to go to school part-time and work full-time because cost of living in Maryland, DMV area is astronomical. Also, I am a breadwinner in my family. I'm one of the first to go to college. Therefore, when my family has financial issues or crises, I'm the first one that they call. So my salary is not just my salary, it's that of my family's. And then lastly, we know that higher education, unfortunately, does not pay graduate students a livable wage, as we're seeing across colleges and universities in the United States with strikes. So therefore, I had to acquire the student debt in order to pursue my education and further just my career. The last point I'll say on this, as we're talking about how does it impact you and like how I have to make decisions, we also have to talk about the workforce and the discriminatory obstacles and barriers that people of color face, which also makes us have to go get the credentials. And so the story I always tell is I remember being in a room with higher ed advocates, I'll be honest, and someone has said jokingly, everyone in this room has docs, so you're the only one with a master's degree, so you have to take notes. Even though it was a joke, it definitely had underpinnings of why, like, okay, now I have to get my credentials. And so doing all of this, I have to delay home ownership. I'm not thinking about marriage right now, if I'm just being honest. I'm just trying to ensure that I'm acquiring myself with the tools and the resources to combat the obstacles I face and that of my children and children's children. And as a result, I just have to continue to delay my milestones. But I'm hoping that conversations like this will allow us to fix this broken system, as both Senators Schumer and Warren have shared, and that we will stop having these conversations, because college affordability is an issue that affects all Americans.
Thank you, Satcha. And if you take a moment to look at the chat, it looks like so many of our viewers right now relate to you and your story. So this is why we share stories. We have a little bit of time left. Wisdom, I would be remiss not to ask you the same question. How does your student loan impact you?
Yeah, no, it's real. It's real. Thank you so much, Satcha, for sharing your story. And I also want to know, Satcha was actually one of the first people I met in DC when we were talking about student debt cancellation and the fight for free college. And so again, recognizing how this work can culminate over years of communication, collaboration, and coordination. I myself, similar to Sabrina, are the child of immigrants. I'm an immigrant myself. Have $30,000 in student debt. I'm from California. I went to school at UC Santa Cruz and then went to grad school at the University of San Francisco. And for 4 years in undergrad, I had $15,000, and for 1 year in grad school, also had $15,000. And so you can also see the disproportionate costs that you see in higher education, but also recognizing that even going to graduate school, seeing even less and less of my Black peers and counterparts in those spaces. I was the only Black male in my graduate program. And so recognizing all the different things that you experience as a Black student, just going through the higher education system, the burden of student debt in addition to that, is something that is greatly felt and deeply felt as well, right? I remember even during my undergraduate experiences, literally having to choose between paying for school or paying for my next meal. There was moments in time where I was houseless and sleeping in my car, right? And so recognizing that these are things that disproportionately impact Black borrowers, disproportionately impact students of color, recognizing the opportunity that we have now. Growing up, felt like debt was such a burden or something to not discuss or to be afraid of, but also recognizing that we have to not be afraid of it and actually continue to fight for what is right within our community. And so I'm really excited to make sure that we continue to push for student debt cancellation to happen, particularly because the plan that is in place does have a differentiation for those who are Pell Grant recipients, right? And we know that 80% of folks who attend our HBCUs receive Pell Grants. And so recognizing that there is an impact or a difference in the way that student debt impacts Black borrowers versus white borrowers, we want to ensure that whatever plan that is put into place is addressing that need and impacting the needs that Black borrowers have on a whole. And so I want to make sure that we continue to center those stories, continue to make sure that Black borrowers are at the heart of this, and that we look at this from a racial equity lens, because we recognize that this disproportionately impacts our community.
Thank you all, and thank you, Wisdom, for sharing your story. It just infuriates me. No one should live in their car or go without a meal while trying to get an education. It's just disgusting, and it's so sad that it's happening in one of the richest countries, or the richest country in the world. And thank you for dedicating so much of your time, work and time to changing that for the next generation, so folks don't have to go through what you and Satra and Sabrina have gone through. We have very limited time left, so I just want to ask you a quick round. What is one thing people can do right now in the 30 days leading up to the courts? Let's start with you, Satra.
Sign up and show up, y'all. There is power in numbers, and we need to show, like I said, not only the Supreme Court justices, but also the federal government, that the people are for student debt cancellation. And so they need to figure it out one way or another. We need to cancel student debt, not tomorrow, not the next day, now.
The day. All right, Wisdom, same question. What is the one thing that folks should do right now leading up to the fight at the Supreme Court?
Agreed with Satra. We got to show up, we got to show out, but we also have to reframe this fight as an opportunity for us to thrive. Canceling student debt gives us the benefit to thrive. This is Black History Month. I'm excited to be here for the first day of Black History Month, and recognizing that this reformation of this reforming of the way in which we think about student debt cancellation is an opportunity not just for the Black community to thrive, for all of our communities to thrive.
Phenomenal. Sabrina, one thing folks can do.
Yeah, one thing you can definitely do is share out on social media, share with your friends, share with your family, get as many folks as you can to show up. Again, there's power in numbers. And I'm going to drop in the chat. On social media, you can add a little frame on your profile picture that says that you're going to be at the rally, which I think is exciting. And we're all going to be changing our profiles to that. So definitely, share with your friends and family, show up. As Satya said, +1 to what everyone here has said. Again, just really excited to be there. I think we're all really energized, and we're doing a countdown. And so definitely count down with us. We're less than 30 days away. And so let's just all continue supporting one another and show up, show out, and share your story.
Absolutely. And I think if we all just, as we're ending this Zoom, can tweet something out, can change our profile photo. I know I'm going to do that right after this Zoom. Just spreading the word right now as we lead up to this, sharing your story. And if you're not in DC, maybe you have 5 friends that are. So we want to get that out. So share this with 5 friends, share this widely. Just such an honor, as Wisdom said, on the first day of Black History Month, to host you, Wisdom Cole and Satra Taylor. Thank you, Sabrina, for always just bringing it and going to the courts yesterday. And Cody, for leading this with me and leading us to this point where we get to fight in the highest court of the land. And we got to keep the confidence we are going to win, and borrowers are going to see relief.
Wonderful. Well, just one last reminder, we're going to put those links in the chat, RSVP for the People's Rally. I saw some comments. If you're in the DC area, you can sign up. If you're not in the DC area, still sign up because we're going to send you ways to get involved online in your local community. It's an all hands on deck moment for everyone. So one more time, I'm going to put that link in the chat. And thank you, everyone, Wisdom, Satra, Sabrina, for sharing your stories, and Sahara and Mike for joining our discussion as well. It's really been a blast, and we'll see you all at the Supreme Court.
Yeah, and to quote Wisdom again, come join the Student Debt Avengers on the steps of the courts. We'll meet you on the steps.